Welcome to the Wealth Matters podcast, where investors come together to better understand how to build passive cash flow and create generational wealth without all the confusing mumbo-jumbo. Here's your host and co-author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Alpesh Pamar.
Welcome to Wealth Matters podcast. Today's guest is Shannon Robnett. Shannon has been in the real estate industry for over 30 years. He has been involved from start to finish on over $250 million in construction projects, covering the gamut from multifamily, professional office buildings to city halls, fire and police stations, schools, industrials, and mini storages as well. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely. So, of course, this is a wealth building show. We only talk about alternative investment strategy, and the biggest part of this alternative investment strategies are real estate. But as we know that in real estate, there are so many ways for us to invest in real estate. And that's why I have Shannon here with us to talk about ground up construction. How do you invest in ground up construction? But before we get started, Shannon, tell us something interesting or funny about yourself.
Well, interesting. I'm a pilot. I'm a third generation pilot.
Wow.
My son is a fourth generation pilot. And
Wow.
because I like tax breaks, I built a flight school so I could take advantage of depreciation on 5 of my airplanes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You got 5 airplanes.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about investment side. 30 years. That's a long time. So I will have to go back 30 years maybe. What was your first investment and how did it work out for you?
You know, my father was a builder and developer and my mother was a real estate agent. So I grew up with that in my family. And I was working on a job site and I was talking to the neighbor lady next door, and she was an older lady. She had a house in an industrial area and she wanted to move to a nursing home with her and her autistic son. And I was also talking with my crane operator, and he wanted to find a couple of acres he could park his cranes on and do that kind of stuff. Really, I put that deal together. I went over and I put the lady's house under contract, not with my last $500, because at the time I was 20 years old. I only had $500. Right. So it was my only $500. And then I went to the crane operator and I put that under contract with him so that he could buy it as soon as I got it through the city and got it rezoned. And so I was able to do that. Back then, when I did that in 1985 or 84, it wasn't called a flip. We just called that buying and selling, right? And so that deal worked out really well. And at that time, I realized that I could make, I made 2 years' wages on that one deal. And I realized that I had a bigger, brighter future than just working for a wage, building a building. I needed to be the owner of the company. Working for my dad wasn't going to be me forever. And at that point, I just realized the development side was also much more lucrative than just the building side.
Right. No, that's pretty interesting. So basically wholesale kind of or flipped the entire transaction. So
Right.
How did you then move into construction side? What was your first project?
Well, that was my upbringing. So I grew up, my dad was building houses. He was building small commercial buildings. I thought I wanted to go to college. I was working at a coffee shop trying to pay my car payment. My brother was building houses. And so I saw that and I started building houses. I dropped out of college and I started building houses. And I realized I didn't like homeowners because they were just a different breed. It was their home. They were very picky. And so I started building office and commercial, and I launched my company going that way. And I launched I launched my construction company in 1999.
Wow, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
So 1999, of course, you have seen two recession. What happened in 2000, especially 2008 and 9? What did you see?
Well, I saw a lot of things, and it's one of the reasons why I really appreciate what you're doing, what other podcasters are doing, because I really truly believe if we'd have had smarter investors, if we'd have had smarter homeowners during that time, we wouldn't have had the financial meltdown that we did. But because people didn't understand the loans they were getting or how to gauge a solid investment, that it caused a tremendous meltdown in the cycle. And, Boise, Idaho is my hometown. That was not spared from that at all. We saw serious problems everywhere. But the other things that we saw that the lenders, the thing that I took away from it is the bank will loan you all the way into the poorhouse. They will loan you enough money to break yourself, right?
Right.
And so just because they offer it to you doesn't mean you should take it.
Take it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's a great point. So let's talk about construction, right? Because most of the time when I'm syndicating, right, a lot of times syndicators and operators put out, oh, this is a value add, right? Heavy value add, whatnot. Well, so we think, oh, it's a value add, will be done in a year or two maybe, and then we'll start getting payout. And when we hear construction, we are like, oh, this is going to take a while. So ground up versus value add, why might we have it wrong?
Well, the reality is I'm creating the original value add, right? So I'll give you an example from an apartment complex we currently have under construction. We're building it for $275,000 a unit.
Okay.
When it's complete and when it has tenants in there, it will be worth about $380,000 a unit.
Right.
So I haven't seen anybody post $100,000 gains per door, right? But the other thing is too, when you go into a value add, the bank loans you the money for the rehab, you go and you do the rehab, you don't really have a way to measure how much is this going to go up, right? You can guess and you can look at the one down the street, but the appraisal's not going to say that this, if you spend $10,000 a unit, it's going to give you $300 in rent. The appraisals don't say that, right? So what you wind up with is a lot of guessing and hypothecating and, pencil whipping a spreadsheet to get it to say what you want. In the ground up construction side, we take the rents today. We are not allowed, the banks will not allow us to look at what rent projections are. So everything we do is based on today's rents. Now, 3 years from that, we're going to have substantially different rents, which means we could have substantially higher profit margins, but we could also have lower profit margins. Right. But we're able to look at that and we're able to gauge that. And so we have, in my opinion, we have a really good safety net because we have an appraiser standing behind it going, this is what it's worth if you sold it today, right? Now, if you got that appraisal let's say you got that appraisal in December of 21, you're going to be looking at an appraisal that says your project's worth $100 million when it may only be worth 90 now, right? But you're also still got a year and a half of runway before the project is finished to bring the rents up the other side and figure out how to get it done, right? And so the reality is you look at that and you have that kind of leeway. The last thing that we do that a lot of people think doesn't happen, but when we sign the bank loan, when we come in and we say we're getting ready to start the project, we're going to sign the bank loan, we also sign the majority of our contracts with our subcontractors and our general contractors. So unless there's change orders, unless there's things on the job that don't work, that don't fit, that don't make sense, you're not going to deal with lumber prices going up because you already bought your lumber. You're not going to deal with concrete prices going up because you already bought your concrete. And the last thing that we do to ensure that with our projects, we do not go over budget is we do what's called a design build. So when I look at a piece of ground, I say, man, I really like this piece of ground and I can get it for $20,000 a door for the ground and I get it rezoned. Then I go to my property manager and I say, what can I get for rents? And they say, you can get $2,000 a door for rents. And I go, wow, okay, great. Then I know I can put it into my spreadsheets and I can know how much I have to build that for to get the proper profit margins, right? But we always build to a cap 8. So when we take on a project, we're planning on us making profit at an 8 cap. Now, we haven't had 8 caps in multifamily in a couple of decades, right? So we know that there's a margin for error, right? We build in a contingency of 7%. So if you've got a $50 million project, you've got $3.5 million in contingency. All of our interest is built into the loan, right? And when you're having the once you know what you can build it for, then you go and bring in the subcontractors to draw the plans. Because no offense to attorneys, engineers, but who's going to draw a better set of plans? The plumber or the engineer, right? Who's going to draw a more cost-effective set? The heating and air guy who knows that, hey, this is a train, but this is a Yakahutsi and it's, a lot less. We can run the ductwork here. It'll be less. And so when we're done, we've got our subcontractors locked into a commitment that these plans are correct. There won't be change orders and the price is good. Because a lot of times you get done drawing the plans and you've drawn the Taj Mahal for, a McDonald's budget, right?
Right.
So those are the things that we do up front that demystify as much as one can what's going to happen in your project. Now you may get in and you may dig into the ground and you find a soft spot, or maybe you've got some other issues. You always have some issues, but we always seem to have a little bit of our contingency left over, a little bit of our interest reserve left over, and we're also building to a margin of error that if you look at where some of these value adds have been trading, they're trading so low, the cap rates are so low that there is no margin of error.
Right.
If you do not get if you only, and look at what's happening right now where interest rates have gone back up, DSCR is kicking in, and now you can't even do your refinance and get any money out. In fact, you're doing a cash in refinance. And so those are some of the protective things that are in there on the development side that everybody looks at and goes, oh my gosh, development is so risky. It's so risky. And it can be, but properly done and properly executed, it's a lot less risky than what you see in where we're at now, right? With what we're doing with a lot of the value add. And then the other thing, if you're looking at a 36-month window or 24-month window to build this thing out in, most recessions don't last but 14 months. So you're going to come through it one side or the other. But if you happen to buy your value add the day the recession starts, you may not live through that.
That's a great point. And I just remembered one of the syndicators / operator, Apple Sway Group, I think, they lost a couple of properties to lenders just in last month, right, in Houston. Right. And that was huge because they had over leveraged and there was a big value add. They didn't perform their due diligence. So that brings me to next question. How do you perform due diligence for ground up construction?
Well, what I do when I look at a property, I can underwrite it in, an hour, right? I mean, I look at it and I call my property manager and I say, hey, what's the market look like in this area? I know what my price per door is, but when I go under contract on a bare piece of ground, everything I do is contingent, right? So when I write up my contract for the bare piece of ground, let's say I'm going to buy 10 acres, right? I will tell the person that this offer is contingent on me receiving approvals from the city to build 200 units. If I get those approvals, I will pay $2 million. So now I know it's $10,000 a door, right? So if I only get approval for 190, either we're going to adjust the price or you can have the property back, right?
Okay.
Or if I don't get approvals, then I haven't bought it and paid for the land and carried the cost of that for years, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes I just did a project and got 200 units rezoned for, took about 4 months here in Idaho.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I had another project that took 16 months. So it varies based on the complexity of it, but the landowner is with you on that and they're part of the game. They are playing along with you. So then what it allows me to do is it allows me time, because development is not a fast moving machine.
Nope.
This is the thing that scares the heck out of me with you value add guys. You hear about something on Wednesday, you've got to have your offer there on Friday, and your earnest money was going non-refundable on Monday, right?
Right.
We don't do any of that. If I see a property, I'm going to submit a letter of intent. After the letter of intent is worked through, we're going to go to a PSA. After the PSA, I've got to go to planning and zoning. I mean, literally before I stick a shovel in the ground, I've got a year and a half. You can raise a lot of capital on a year and a half. You can do a lot of due diligence on a year and a half. You can get a lot of studies done
Yeah.
And you're not in a time crunch to get this done in 30 days. So for me, I have lots and lots of time and lots of resources that allow me to do that in a very logical way, so that by the time I come to closing, I may have spent $75,000 or $80,000 on my due diligence, but I've done it over 9 months, and I've done it one step at a time instead of making one phone call, throwing $90,000 out the window, but one bad report and we're walking away. Right.
I see. No, that's a great. So let me ask you, let me interrupt here. Are the landowners okay with, let's say, staying with you for a year while you are going through all the approvals and due diligence process? That means they are stuck with the deal and they still don't know if you, after a year, you are going to go ahead and, sign the contract.
No, we have the signed contract.
I mean,
right?
buy the property.
But the reality is, typically, if you're buying a property, you've had a preliminary meeting with the city, you understand what it is, but you're not going to buy a property that maybe you could put industrial on, or maybe you could put multifamily, right? They're different animals,
yes,
right? So
zoning, yep.
So I'm going to answer questions for the owner one way or the other, and I'm going to do it at my expense instead of his. So most landowners, if they're wanting to sell, they usually want top dollar, right?
Of course.
And so I can get you top dollar because I know the maximum density on this property is 200 doors. The other guy, he's going to come to you and he's going to say, well, I got to buy it and I got to carry the interest on it. And then I got to go to the city. And what if I only get 150, 150 doors? Then I can't do this. So he's going to try and angle for a cheaper price. I'm always willing to pay your price. Whatever that is, if I'm going under contract on it, we're not haggling about the price. I'm just asking for terms to do it in.
That's a great point, right? Because always sellers are looking for either the best price or the quickest, time to get out of it, right?
Exactly.
So you have to either offer one of those. So that makes sense. So what else, when you are going through due diligence for ground up construction, what else do you do? What kind of steps do you take?
Well, obviously, we've talked with our property management team. We've done a market study, so we know that there's a need for it. We've met with the city. We've checked with them and made sure there's availability for it. We check things like, is sewer and water available? Do we have adequate water pressure for fire sprinkler systems? What about our ingress and egress? What do the highway districts think about the project? So we're doing all of those steps as we go along. And typically an apartment complex involves at least a couple of hearings to where we got to go talk with the city council and, planning and zoning and all those guys. So we're doing all of that as we go along. We've done our soils testing. We've got some preliminary designs done. We've met with a general contractor about what do you think this is going to cost? And then we're running that metrics of what does the market really truly need? Do we need A class? Do we need B class? Do we need high-end finishes? Can we get away with lower-end finishes? What is our real avatar here for our renter, so that we can make sure that we dial that in on the cost approach side, so that we're getting the maximum between what we invest in the property and what that gets us for rent? Because really, that's the spread we're all after, right? What did it cost? Yes. And what's it worth at a cap rate?
Of course. No, that makes sense. So let's talk about this. Of course, you mentioned a lot about apartment buildings. What are you currently focused on? Mostly apartment buildings or anything else?
We kind of have a mix right now. I've done a lot of industrial in my life, and I really like industrial because industrial is really recession resistant. But the other thing that I love about industrial is when insurance goes up, which everybody's seeing their insurance go up, that's a triple net expense, and that goes directly to the tenant. So when you're talking about a rent, that's a pure profit to you, right? That's all yours. Your expenses are over here, the tenants are paying that, right? If you live in Wisconsin, you might have $10,000 snow removal bill, you might have a $50,000 snow removal bill. But in an industrial property, you don't care.
Right.
In fact, half the time the tenants don't want it because they don't want to pay it. They're going to shovel it themselves.
Right.
So we like industrial. We've always liked industrial, but I think as the market kind of is sitting where it's at, I'm tending to push more into the industrial space. We've got a couple of deals right now with national tenants in Florida. We just closed on one in Houston. where we're going into those areas because there's strong markets. We've got national tenants. We've got long leases. So we've got a 10-year lease with a corporate guarantee. So we've got a lot of things there that we don't face turnover. We're not facing, those kinds of things. We're not going to see rents skyrocket either. So there's the downside to it, right? But you've got to play both sides against the middle and make sure that, in my opinion, you have a balanced portfolio of what you're building.
No, that's correct. And I love industrial right now, especially with this Make in America movement. We have a lot of the jobs are coming back. So industrial is going to be pretty interesting and very important in our portfolios.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And which markets are you currently focused on?
We're focused on Nashville. We've got a project getting ready to start out there. Florida. We're in Texas. We're wrapping up our business in Washington, and then we're in Idaho, and then looking at either Charlotte or Raleigh to start another one.
Yeah, Charlotte and Raleigh, I think it would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carolinas are doing amazing because I have 3 mobile home parks in, South Carolina and North Carolina. So, and they are killing it. So, yeah, I agree. So let's talk about because 30 some years, that's amazing. What has been your standout deal or best deal so far?
We had a deal that we had sold, and it was a 2-phase sale, and the buyers decided that they weren't getting a good enough price, and so they sued us.
Oh, wow.
And there was, they drugged this on for 2 years. And finally we prevailed. And as our, we could either collect money from them for damages or we could take the property back.
Okay.
Well, it was supposed to close in 2019 and it closed in the January of 22.
Oh man, you killed it.
So we had a simultaneous closing at about 18 million higher than we'd sold it to them.
Of course. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing after getting sued.
But with that comes persistence and perseverance, right?
Yes.
If you're in this right now and you just got into it 3 years ago and it's really rough right now and it's rocky, I can tell you that's real estate. Right? 1 minute you're eating filet mignon and the next minute you're eating bologna, because that's real estate. And you work hard, but you've got to stay persistent. If you're not going to be persistent, you're not going to learn the lessons. You're not going to get through the difficult situations to get to the next good cycle. And it's in those cycles, there's a deal to be had in every cycle. But you have to be persistent in order to crush it like that one.
No, that's awesome. So let me throw you a curveball now. What has been your worst deal and what lessons did you learn from it?
My worst deal was also a partnership. And we were the general contractor on the project. And the partner I had at the time was kept telling me I was not in direct communication with the bank. And so my partner kept telling me, well, the bank's not funding. And he was taking that money and not paying my bill. Right. And so what I learned is from that was the worst deal I ever did. And it cost me personally about $4 million.
Whoa.
But what I learned from that, I learned a $4 million lesson. If I'm going to go into partnership with somebody, I have to be 51%. I have to be direct to the bank. I have to have access to every piece of information and be a part of every single thing. I can't just be somebody that shows up part of the time. Because if you do that, you're putting yourself at somebody else's discretion. And there's a lot of honest people that do dishonest things under certain circumstances.
Right. Well,
and there's a lot of bad stuff that happens. And if you're not thoroughly connected with the deal, you're not going to be at the helm. You're not going to understand what's going on, and you probably won't be able to save the ship.
Oh, that is amazing. Thank you for sharing the worst deal as well, because this gives my listeners a lot of ideas as well. So are you ready for fire round?
Yep.
Would you be changing any business or investment strategy because of this current environment where inflation is still stagnating and recession seems to be here or around the corner?
No, because I've been doing this so long that I don't underwrite to the the pricing that we had. I underwrite, like I said, to an 8 cap. I look at underwriting to 6.5%, 7% interest rates. So for me, I didn't change from 5 years ago when we went through the low point of interest rates. I didn't change anything there. I don't change that model. We do diversify in different ways and do more industrial or more multifamily or whatever based on what the demand is. But for the most part, our investment strategies are the same that they were 20 years ago.
That's great. Favorite nonfiction book? Could be self-help, investment, real estate.
You know, the one I like the most is the one by Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference.
Oh, yes.
I love that book because he tells you a story, and then after he tells you the story, he shows you how that particular hostage situation applies to business or whatever, right? Yeah. So I love the fact that he's blended those two worlds together, and it's not just all this stuff about how you can do this and how you can do that, right?
Yeah. No, you reminded me to go through the book again. I try to go through it every year. It's a great book.
It's a great book.
Any tool or website you recommend or you cannot live without?
I couldn't live without Excel. I mean, if you had to do all those calculations, right, and then carry over and then flip the page, I couldn't live without Excel. If I could only have one program, I would have to have Excel.
That makes sense. Any advice for investors?
Be persistent. Never invest more than you can afford to lose, and know who you're investing with. If you don't really know them, if you haven't been to see their operation, you have no business investing with them. You need to know your investor or your general partners. You need to keep it between the lines on how to do that. Not put all your eggs in one basket, and you need to know what you're doing. But none of that's difficult, right?
Yes. How do you give back?
I work with currently about 3 nonprofit organizations, and I love to be part of my local community. So I have a podcast as well. I hold meetups. I do a lot of things. I work one-on-one with other investors that are wanting to level up their game because I know how important that mentorship was to me coming up, and I want to make sure that I'm able to do that for others.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for your time. How can my listeners reach out to you?
The easiest way to do that is just to go to our website. It's shannonrobnett.com. You can hit the connect with us button. You can get onto my schedule. We can schedule a 15-minute call. You can see my videos. You can see our deals. All that's right there at shannonrobnett.com.
I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes so others can enjoy the show too. Have a great week and happy investing!